an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece episodes 514 through 516. Living through hell, Sanji's fight for his manhood. I will get much, much stronger. Zoro's pledge to his captain. And Luffy's training begins to the place we promised in 2 years. In these episodes, we find out what the code was on Luffy's arm, and we also find out why everybody is turning around and going back. And I am interested. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. I was about to say commissioning this message. Like, I haven't done this intro literally 1,000 times, if not more. I'm pretty sure now I want to go check how many Spoil Me episodes there are. But, yeah, thank you for commissioning this episode, Florian. Appreciate you. So, oh my God. There are 1,629 episodes on the Spoil Me feed. That's a lot more than I was even expecting. Goodness gracious. Good God Almighty. All right. Well, now that we've had that sobering look into the reality of my life, let's begin. You guys, I didn't realize it while I was watching it, even though I probably, if you had asked, would have been like, oh, I guess that makes sense. But that is the end of this arc. And according to Hulu, next time it's season 9. And I'm going to assume we aren't spending a bunch of time with our friends in separate places. I'm assuming we're jumping ahead in time to seeing our friends like reunite quickly, because they've spent a lot of time apart already, which is part of why I wasn't seeing it coming that we were going to just say, hey, let's continue to spend this time apart. But once it's made obvious, like the point of it all, I'm like, oh, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. I just don't think that the show would be interested in continuing their separate journeys beyond this point. So I think we're going to get a time jump. And I have always had like a sort of a love-hate relationship with time jumps. Sometimes they can be really interesting because it will show you a character suddenly being a person that you don't recognize from them. And you go and over time with flashbacks, you come to discover what happened to them to cause them to change so much. And I think that can be really fascinating. But then there are like the really shitty, lazy time jumps where a baby character was born and they don't want to deal with like a baby on the show. So they just go, why don't we just time jump to now that baby's grown up? Or the baby just ages really fast, but that's a different issue. And sometimes it can just feel like the writers of a property don't know what to do with anybody, and adding a time jump was the only way that they could believably start a new arc of real drama without it feeling completely unbelievable or pulling it out of their ass and having basically like a Deus Ex Machina, like a comet hit the neighborhood or something. So, you know, it can be done for all kinds of reasons, and some of them it works really well and some it doesn't. And I have high hopes for this because the fact that we're getting a kind of a plan for each of them and what they're going to be learning about, and then the fact that there's the opportunity for the story to go in a lot of different directions based on what happens to some of them during that time. 2 years is a while. You can meet a lot of different people. You can get into a couple different like weird situations that maybe don't immediately have consequences, but then there's like a slow simmer and somebody doesn't realize that something's going on with a friend that they met at one point, and it could come back around like a ways down the road. You run into some random character and they're like, oh, that's so-and-so from the island that I was on, you know? So I feel like that could potentially open lots of avenues for stories, and it would be fun. So I'm just putting out there how I feel about this in general. And then, so episode 514, we find out like exactly what's going on with this code. And the reason that Luffy decided to do something to get on the front page of the newspaper was just so they would see that and they would be able to put two and two together. And it was like the letter D was crossed out. So it had been that they were going to be meeting someplace in 3 days. That was like the promise they made to one another about Sabaody, which is honestly hilarious because I didn't realize it has clearly been more time than 3 days, obviously, but I didn't really stop and consider that the War of the Best feels to me like it took place over the course of a week, but probably took place over the course of like 2 days or something, you know? And it's just, it was basically unending. There was no break in there. So I don't have a good concept of it. And if you told me that like, oh, it was a week in their time, it would still kind of not make sense logistically. Nobody had to stop and eat something for a week. Like what? But also so much happened that it feels like it had to be at least a week. There's no way, you know? So anyway, we start this episode off checking back in. Oh wait, no, I'm on the wrong one. I'm going to get much, much stronger. I want to go through Living Through Hell because, this episode starts with Nami at this weather place. And this is, you guys, I'm kind of falling into the same issue that I have before, where Nami is such an exaggerated example of like some really nasty, potentially misogynistic characteristics that mostly can be played in a fun way that I can overlook that and just be like, oh, Nami, oh, you. But this, where she's pretending to be hurt and using her tears as weapons and everything, it's just given me the ick all around. It was like fine when that was what she did for the one gag, but now it's sort of the way she's deciding to be in general with this group. And a part of me is sort of like, well, I guess if you decided to make her the one woman on an island in the sky full of apparently all dudes, then having her behave over the top with them in an like overly feminine way does kind of make sense. But the problem is, I'm not sure that it even occurred to Oda that everybody here is a dude, because he makes practically every character male almost always, except for like the one maiden island. So I don't know. The whole vibe of this and her like just doing her over dramatic, well, I'll just jump off the side of this island. I was just kind of like, all right. It's just funny because like there was so much more interesting stuff going on with other characters. And then you come to people like with Nami and with Usopp, where it really seemed like they were spinning their wheels and didn't really know what to do with them and how to add conflict to their situations. But eventually she convinces them to stay, and she's like, they are on a sort of roller coaster about how they're feeling regarding her. And it seems like they're pretty much locked into anger by the time she's like, okay, as long as you're actually sorry. Now that that's settled, I'm going to stay here a bit longer to learn more about the weather. My name is Nami, so stop calling me young lady, please. First, I'd love a house of my own to live in. Everybody needs a little privacy, am I right? I'll need a bed, too, and feather pillows and a nice big bathtub. No, wait, a jacuzzi. Thanks, you guys. Sky grandpas are the best. Time to rock and roll. And she just leaves with them teetering over the edge of the cliff, about to, like, plunge to their deaths. So, yeah, this is, you know, do you guys get what I'm saying about Nami? It's like, because the only other woman on the crew is Robin. And Robin is so boring, guys. I wanted to like her so much more. I'm increasingly disappointed. Robin just feels like she's on a different show. It's weird, you know? Once she busts her power out, then you're like, oh, right. Like, that's why you're here. But her deal, everybody, just backing up a little bit, when Kuma was like, where would you want to go to Perona? And she described exactly the place that she wound up. He asks that question again on Sabaody when he comes across the Straw Hats. And as we step back and look at the way things have shaken out at this point, it's clear that each of our characters has wound up in a place that they can get the exact specific type of training in their interest and strength that they would need. So Kuma sent them purposely to places that would be advantageous to them if they were able to make it work, which is really fascinating. And Kuma continues to be of great interest to me. And I am saddened at the fact that it seems like maybe we're supposed to take it that he is dead, but it's possible like he's being held somewhere and that the copies that are being made of him are just and he is still alive, but I don't know. And if he did this the way that I think, that means he was really out here trying to help the Straw Hats in a long-term way, which is the foresight. What a weird ability he has. So anyway, everybody gets put into their particular situation that benefits them. Nami is going to be here learning about weather from the Sky Grandpas. We've got, obviously, last episode with Chopper and the natives that are going to be teaching him about their plants and medicine, and they have this huge library. Robin, you guys, I don't know what to think. Robin is, she wound up in a place where she helped a bunch of people who were being abused and misused by the government, right? So it's weird the way that it got set up, because everybody else, it was like they were dealing with a completely what's the word I want? An irrelevant conflict. And then they get to the point where they're like, wait, I could stay and learn stuff too. But with Robin, it feels like she wound up in the conflict that's really supposed to be her big journey. And now that's over. And so she's just chilling on a boat. And everybody else is like busy working to train. And she is just telling them, I'm going to be cautious of trusting you because I don't know you very well. And I'm going to sit out here where it's safe and not go into a room alone with you where there are no exits. Like in a way that's, I think, meant to be a sort of charming hearkening back to the way that she used to live, not trusting anyone. But feels very much not heartwarming. It feels like a distinct step backward in her overall characterization that bums me out and made me go, what are you doing with this, with her? It just felt so completely different than everyone else's situation. And I don't understand what our objective is there. If it's just saving those people and now it's just that she gets to take a break. But the speech that she gives, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it means something. And the meaning is being mistaken as sort of like it's going to seem nostalgic to us or something. Instead of just kind of depressing and her not trusting people again. Which isn't, we don't want that, right? Like, it was just weird to me. Florian says, I think he sent Robin somewhere she will encounter other revolutionaries. He has connections to them and probably knows that that's her place to be. But yeah, I get what you mean. You know what? I'm going to be honest, Florian. The revolutionaries and the connection with them wasn't even on my mind. And you're totally right. That's clearly like the main thing is meeting other revolutionaries and people who are willing to be like, fuck you, world government. But because they kind of haven't been the main point for most of her story, it's been about the people that she was saving. they fall way into the background for me at this point. And I'm sure they'll come further into the foreground the more we get to know them and see them working and stuff. But right now, I'm mostly thinking about the little girl who gave her portrait and the way these people were being used as forced labor and all of them. And the revolutionaries just sort of swooped in at the very end to save the day. So they don't really register for me. But yeah, that's definitely what it is. I appreciate you just like pointing out something super, like something that should have been super obvious because I needed it. So, okay. The deal with, we also, in everybody's POV, we get a flashback to what was going on with them when Luffy offered them a place on his crew. And, you know, it's definitely filler in a way, but also it's been so long since they joined the crew in a lot of cases that I appreciated the refresh and just like, you know, getting to see what was going on with them. And I think they're using the actual voice dub from the original recording as well, so their voices even sound a little different, and it was just very interesting. So we get the, you know, her flashing back to asking Luffy for help and him taking her in, and when she speaks to the Sky Grandpa, she's just like, I'm going to do anything I can to be the best navigator that's ever lived because that's what Luffy deserves, and he needs it because even though he does his best as a captain and is dependable and a good fighter, he does not know anything about the ocean. So it's all going to be on my shoulders, frankly, and I got to be prepared. And it's sort of the ways in which their goals differ is really interesting because so Robin is bringing him revolutionaries as backup, basically, I'm going to assume. We also have, but she's like, it's going to be 2 years that she's with them first, right? Then we have Nami, who's going to be learning about weather, which sounds so like boring on the surface, I'm going to admit. I know that this show has found really interesting ways for her to use weather as part of her power. And it's one of those things that I feel like I often am a bit frustrated at how weird it is that she has weather powers that aren't even inherent. They're not from a devil fruit. They're powers that are dependent on an object that Usopp made and gave to her. So there's a sense almost sometimes of like, that's not a power. That's her using a tool that Usopp could also use. That it feels almost like anybody could pick this up and do this, which I don't think is actually meant to be true, but it can feel because it's dependent on this object, which Usopp trained her how to use. It feels like it's not unique to her because somebody else could replicate what she's doing. Does that make sense? So it's sort of a weird thing where unless she eats a devil fruit, there's not really another way to make her make sense as a fighter. And so we had to give her something, but it just feels a little bit off kilter sometimes. But between her and Robin, their overall goals at the moment are much less overtly martial compared to all of the male characters. So let's talk about Usopp and get him out of the way because I really hate this storyline. I really do, guys. It's such a shame too, because like Usopp was somebody who took a little while to grow on me. And then once he began to, I loved him so much. We had such a like Usopp heavy, tragic arc that gripped me. And now I just feel like it's such a disservice to have thrown him into this weird situation that they've decided on. But he's on the island that's a giant eating flower, and he begs Heracles for help in learning how to be the real Sniper King, because he thinks that Heracles is this amazing fighter with all these great gadgets who has learned to survive on this bonkers island. So obviously he is somebody worth learning from. And I kept thinking about like Usopp eventually wanting to get off the island, and we have with some of our friends obvious means by which they could escape, but they choose not to take. You know, we have Chopper has the birds and he turns around, and Nami has a ship that she could ostensibly hijack. And with Usopp, I'm not really sure how he was going to get off the island. I don't know how that would even work. My assumption at this point is that because so much of his stuff is prop based and tool based, that he's going to build something to get him off the island, which will be interesting. But will Heracles want to go with him? And if he learns this from Heracles apparently won't have like figured it out himself, or doesn't want to leave. Like maybe he had the opportunity and he could have and he just didn't. Which I'm going to be curious to see if he just stays there when Usopp leaves or not. But all we get from Usopp is basically, I got so fat eating all this island food that now I have to train like crazy in order to lose the weight again. And it basically seems like it's just going to be a fat to fit storyline, which is very, very boring. And I feel like he deserved better in general. Florian says, Usopp's thing, well, this whole plant is a trick. It's a lie in a sense, as it seems to be successful. I always saw a weird parallel there. That's interesting. I didn't think about that, Florian. I like that. That basically, like, the flower is an island lying about being an island. Or the island's a flower lying about being an island. And he's a big liar. So he wound up someplace that the whole thing is just like all not what it seems. That's interesting. It just doesn't like, that sounds fascinating. And then what do? You just have him get really fat because he's eating too much. Like, that's what you do? It sounds like it's got so much more interesting potential, and then they just went and did something with it that is bizarre. So that's the deal with him. So he basically ends his arc with just sitting down in front of Heracles, who has decided to be his master. And he's got like a chalkboard and is straight up giving a little lecture at this point, talking about the seeds of this particular thing and what he can do with them. So that's the whole thing with Usopp, and that's where I'm going to leave that. Frankie. So Frankie's thing is really, really funny to me because, you know, he blew up that lab, and I was genuinely like, that's terrible. Like, you really did fuck up. But it turns out that was like a beta laboratory, and there was like a better one that was sort of underground. There was a secret entrance to. So all the stuff that was in the lab that Frankie blew up, all that was just like kitchen appliances, like stuff to improve your quality of life is the way he describes it. But the stuff that is in the second lab is the truly bonkers, intense, like animals and body modding and all of that sort of thing. So Frankie, who, by the way, is still walking around without his front half, basically. He's got a real creepy look about him. He stumbles across all of this stuff that could potentially lead him to building an even more juiced up version of himself. And I don't know about you guys, but I am dying to see what he comes up with. Because Frankie was already pretty bonkers, and he would occasionally pull some stuff out that you were like, you can what now? And it was still happening every now and then. So giving him like 2 full years to add a bunch of bells and whistles, I'm thinking will be very, very fun to see what he has managed to come up with. I should mention too, in terms of Usopp and him wanting to become the actual Sniper King, that I'm also very interested in. It would be really great if he could actually like back up the talk. So I'm not trying to, when I'm talking about Frankie, I'm not trying to say like Usopp is uninteresting in terms of where this could go, but I feel like the means by which we are getting there feel very, very stupid. So yeah, Frankie's deal, he's going to stay there and occasionally get cola deliveries from these guys, and that's all he's going to do. And it appears that maybe finding this cache of stuff has earned him, if not the forgiveness, they're just willing to overlook the fact that he blew the place up. But there is a point, because he winds up on fire somehow, and it's like he gets spotted by some people, and it starts this whole legend, which I'm always a big fan of that sort of thing. I'm somebody who really likes stories about cryptids in general, you know, Bigfoot, the Yeti, Loch Ness Monster, like all that stuff. I'm a big fan. I'm somebody who really does believe that, like, there are probably pockets of the world where things are just haven't been messed with to the degree that life has changed there or continued on in a way that it had for a long time without being disturbed. And so maybe there are life forms that we don't see anywhere else, you know? And for the most part, I don't believe in the stories, but I enjoy the stories. I think they're really fun. And thinking about how he would wind up becoming part of like a cryptozoology is very funny to me. The whole thing is like everybody's saying, because the folks are trying to describe who blew it up, and they describe Frankie, but the guy who's here investigating is just like, that doesn't make any sense. The last place he was spotted was Sabaody, and this is way too far. He couldn't have gotten all the way here in this time. And they also describe him as looking like a gorilla, I think. And the guy who's saying like, well, that sounds ridiculous, actually himself is drawn to look a little bit like a gorilla, and I couldn't tell if that was on purpose, but I did think it was funny. So this brings me to Zoro, and Zoro's thing is really interesting because I was starting to very vaguely cotton on to the fact that everybody was places that would be good for them, but I was really thinking that Zoro was going to be training more with these friggin' humandrels, because Hawkeye doesn't seem to have any interest in him. And indeed, when he is directly asked for help, is very contemptuous of Zoro in a way that I was not ready for. Like, I know that he is generally somebody who doesn't take other people seriously unless they can prove themselves, because he has come across a lot of blowhards in his time. So that makes total sense in his like encounter with Zoro the first time, where he uses his tiny little knife and whatnot. But here, I thought that he would have seen enough of Zoro and what he could do that he would be a little bit more open to training him. And it's not until Zoro explains that he has taken down all the humandrels and that it's just Hawkeye that needs to be taken down, that's finally when Mihawk is like, oh, really? Okay. Because initially, he makes fun of Zoro for asking his enemy for assistance and is like, don't you have any self-respect? Which a part of me really felt like I don't know if I would even call you his enemy, dude. Like, you are on the government side by contract, but not by duty. So it's hard for me to see you that way. I see him as much more of a like independent contractor rather than somebody who's a legit enemy. Enemy in name only, but his heart doesn't seem to be in it too much. He's just doing what needs doing without the passion or the feeling of these people genuinely deserve to be put down. And I just thought that he would be a little bit more receptive to Zoro suggesting this, because he had seen him like fighting pretty well and was just sort of like, you know what? I took interest in Luffy. I had a point where I could have gone after him because I was ordered to, but I found him so genuinely fascinating that I decided to like let him off and just watch what happened. And you have upheld things on your end to a degree that I'm sort of interested in you in the same way and just want to see what happens. But no, Zoro has to really convince him. And even at one point when he's like, so what would you do? Zoro's like, well, then I would kill you. And to his credit, Mihawk is like, really? You would kill me? And you're just telling me that. And you want me to train you to get to the point where you can kill me. You want me to like participate in that. And then abruptly is like, yeah, okay. Which I did. I found that truly funny. And the fact that Zoro admits it. And why, though, Zoro? I feel the same thing with him regarding treating Mihawk as an enemy and being like, then I'll kill you. I guess, but why would you? The only reason to kill him would be in the heat of the moment when he was up against Luffy. And he's not right now. I just feel like you win him over to your side. The thing is, it's really hard for me to know what Mihawk cares about. He is such a closed book, you know? And I don't really understand his motivation in general. So trying to like appeal to him to get him to back our revolutionaries rather than the Marines, I'm not even sure what would be what's a convincing argument. I was going to say a consistent argument, that too. But there's just, you know, when you try and appeal to somebody for help, you have to give them something to care about. And that requires you to understand what their motivations are in life and show them how teaming up with you would get them where they want to go. And Mihawk, I just don't know what he wants. He doesn't seem interested in money. He doesn't seem to have any particular ideology except for the pureness of sword fighting. And he lives alone on this island with fucking animals for company. There's nobody that he seems to really care about. So how would you even... I mean, I guess the government has managed to get him on contract, so he must care about money enough for that. But I don't know. Florian says, well, Zoro wants to be the best and therefore has to defeat Mihawk. But yeah, they should be buds. That's true. That's true. So yeah, Perona is like unofficial nursemaid though, because Mihawk, once he agrees to train Zoro, is like, well, I'm not training you in this fucking condition, because Zoro is just a bleeding disaster at this point. The Humandrills have Humandrilled him into the ground, and he has to just get some rest and recuperation before he is going to be up for anything. But Perona is put in the position where it's like, oh yeah, bring her to, or Perona, carry him to a bed and make sure he gets like all the fluids he needs and everything. And she's just like, what the hell? I really like her as a character mixed into all this, if for no other reason than her, being some break in the, I don't want to say tedium because that sounds really insulting and that's not what I mean. But she is both Zoro and Mihawk are so serious. They both take themselves seriously. They take sword fighting seriously. And so you need some character to be in this mix that is going to lighten the fucking mood and give you a joke or two every now and then. And Perona is so intolerant of both of their fucking attitudes, and also like outspoken enough whether anybody's listening or not. So she doesn't need for them to actually be paying attention. All she needs is for like her mouth to be working. She's very much like me, where I'll just talk to myself. That's no problem. Yeah, she says to Zoro, what are you waiting for? Let's go, stupid. And Mihawk says he's a fool, but he would not throw away his pride for his own sake. He must be thinking of someone else. And I thought that was interesting that he was able to like detect that. It makes sense from what he has gathered of who Zoro is. And yeah, this is when we have the thing with the code on Luffy's arm being explained by Zoro to Perona. And that's why we have to train, because we're going to be going into the new world and we all have to be stronger the next time we meet. Okay. So let's back up a little bit here and talk about Sanji, because Sanji, you guys understand, is going to be the one that I am the most interested in because it's food related. This is genuinely my angle on this. Sanji, I was really not sure what to think because of him being on an island that, like, at first blush looks like it's going to be a bunch of beautiful women, and then it turns out to be a bunch of either trans women or just cross-dressers. I think we're going to go with just cross-dressers. I'm not really sure. But I was sort of thinking that it was a bit of a joke on him. And then it was like, oh, it's about him learning to embrace his feminine side and not worry about his masculinity. Which I was like, that's an interesting angle with a surprising amount of subtlety and nuance to it, even though it's being done in a very sort of ham-fisted manner. But it still wasn't really like it. I was still sort of puzzled. And then he comes out of this, what feels like a hypnotism session. Like he got made to think he wanted to be in the dress and wear makeup and everything. And then the shock of the news from Luffy brought him back to his senses, and he has stopped with all of that and doesn't seem to want to participate anymore, which was a bit... I was a little bit bummed about how completely back to his original point of view he reverted. Like, I was thinking that he was going to be a little bit more like, well, yeah, I'll wear a dress every now and then because it is comfy. But he is still doing the whole, like, absolutely not, I'll never do that. And I just want to look at ladies. And the whole thing is just really flip-floppy. And I would have liked to feel like his experience had made him grow a little bit more comfortable with this whole arrangement, but he's still like calling the people on this island freaks and weirdos and, just sort of mocking them. And I was just like, oh, I thought the point was that you weren't going to be like this anymore. So that was a little bit disappointing. That said, this is so funny. So he's sitting down at the table with Eva, and he didn't make the food. I thought we were going to have him like cooking, but instead he's just eating. And he's like, oh, these meals are really good. Like, who made this? And Eva tells him that this is the meal of aggression, I think is the way he says it. The whole thing is so bizarre. So basically, the bit is that all of the people on this island, he calls them my candies, which I actually just love, to be honest. But he's like, everybody here is a fucking badass hard body. And the reason for that is the food is made in such a way as to promote aggression and make you... It's such a weird... I don't know why it's aggression. I feel like maybe it's the translation being sort of weird, because aggression itself is a weird way to frame all of this. But maybe it's supposed to be something more like fortitude or endurance or something. Like, I could see how the translation might pick a word that feels like a synonym but actually has a subtle change in meaning. But it's altogether meant to be like, the food here is magical and makes them all incredibly strong and muscular and completely ripped and jacked in a way that you will never see anywhere, because nobody understands nutrition the way that we do. And Eva, literally, this cracked me up so bad. he picks up a glass of milk and is like, if everybody drank a glass of milk every day, there would be no more crime. It makes perfect sense, or something like that. It's just logic, something like that, where I was just like, oh, that's the leap we're making. Okay. I thought it was about to be like if everybody like ate better and took better care of themselves, then, you know, the whole world would be experiencing a better like way of life. And that it would be the sort of thing where it's like vaguely shaming about fatness or just eating junk or whatever. But instead, it's much more like, no, our food is magical. And I was just not prepared for this. So the thing that Sanji is doing here, when I had initially been like, maybe it's just to improve his fighting, I think the fighting is definitely going to be part of it, clearly, because that's the next thing that he has to agree to. But what he's going to be getting access to are the secret recipes for this like aggression food, which, okay, sure. It's so, and he even is sort of like surprised at the fact that he had never considered this aspect of cooking. He has always cooked for the flavors, for the creativity of it, but considering food as building blocks and being like, oh, you can like shape your body depending on what you put into it. I never even thought about it that way before. And this is when he says these candies, if they can build muscle, I wonder what else is possible with that food. And then all of a sudden he gets one of those nosebleeds that's like a jet that shoots him flying into the air, anime style. And he says, does that mean I could cook sexy food and make Robin and Nami even hotter than they are now? Because that sounds awesome. Oh, God, this dude. But yeah, he says, you've got to teach me how to make this magic food thing. And Eva says, you wish, and just kicks him right in the head. And says, hold your horses, Buster. You have to learn it, or earn it. There are 99 vital recipes in all. There are many new Kama Kenpo recipes, but this one is passed down as a form of bridal training, which I don't really understand what that means, but I'm going to let that go. And these secrets don't get shared with just any random scum that makes their way to us. If you want to learn our recipes, you need the heart of a true maiden, and these ladies would love to teach you. Their eyes light up, and he says, not a chance. Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not here to be gal pals with your freaky little friends. I was born to love the most beautiful ladies in the world. Oh my God. He is so tiresome. Eva just yells, not. Quirks aside, you've got guts, boy. I like you, so that means I'll give you a chance. And yeah, it says,
I'll be giving the recipes to the 99 Grand Masters of New Kama Kenpo on this island. If you're half the man you think you are, you can defeat them and claim the recipes for yourself. Also, do not let your guard down, because every new Kama on the island would be trying to put this adorable dress on you. Hope you have fun protecting your fragile manhood. And I love the fact that Eva said fragile manhood to Sanji. Amazing. And he just looks around and sees all of these like silhouettes around him talking about how you better not try and sleep again because that dress is really sweet and you're going to look amazing in it. One of them says, if you've never worn one before, you're going to love it because it's so breathable. And I was like, he's literally been here for like a while wearing a dress. I thought that line was sort of weird. But yeah, it's so nice to be girly. And it ends with Eva saying, it's you versus the island of New Kama Kenpo. Let's begin. And if you can win this fight, I'll also throw in a ship. Not a bad deal, if you ask me.
And this is when Sanji gets his sort of flashback because, he has to consider whether he's willing to take this deal at all. And it's just reinforced that, of course, he needs to do this because Luffy risked everything taking him onto his ship and is so unflagging in his support of his friends. How the fuck is he not going to do absolutely everything he can to bring more to the table so that Luffy can depend on him, And, and we also have him like talking about the all blue, which I had totally forgotten about that whole thing. But, so yeah, he decides to take this deal from Eva, and I can't wait to find out about the types of things that Sanji has learned to cook and the ways in which this is going to work, because what I keep imagining is the mechanic in Breath of the Wild, which I never finished playing, and I really do need to. But you can find all these different ingredients by just scavenging around, and you find them and then you put them in a pot, and depending on what the ingredients are, they give you different functions. So if you've got recipes that are made with fire salamanders, that creates a dish that will keep you warm in the mountains, and you have to be able to have something keeping you warm, or else the mountains will literally kill you. So what I'm imagining is that sort of thing, where if Sanji can get his hands on certain ingredients, he can make food that has a particular advantage, and if not necessarily a healing power, then a power up of some kind or a protection of some kind, whatever. And I just really enjoy that sort of game mechanic. I always enjoy it both because I just like cooking in real life, but also in something like Breath of the Wild, the gathering aspect is always super fun to me. I really, really enjoy that. So it's one of the things that you can do mostly without encountering any combat. So it's very soothing and calming with the sounds of nature around you and whatnot when you're playing. So I was just sort of thinking that maybe that will be the way this works. And if it is, I'm going to be really excited, because in a lot of ways, Sanji hasn't had that much to do with his cooking. He cooks occasionally, but he's really much more of the kiki man. And that's fine, you need that. But I wouldn't be mad if we had a little bit more time spent in the kitchen with him and a little bit more of a description of the ingredients and having to collect them and all of that. Also, just on a personal note, I am in the process of beginning to sort of focus myself on self-care a lot more. And I have been doing a jogging program, which I'm just completing the second month of, and I have only missed one day, and I'm feeling really good about that. But I've begun to think to myself, okay, it's really time that I start taking my nutrition seriously again, because I have been wanting to take it one step at a time and get my movement a little bit up before I begin to worry about it. And it's very true that what you put in your body is going to affect how you feel. And it's this is no attempt to shame anybody, because I eat plenty of junk food and I don't apologize for that at all. That's part of the joy of living, is eating crap that tastes great. But I do a lot of eating crap that doesn't even taste that good to me, and that I'm not really even enjoying, just because it's there. And I ignore the fact that I feel like shit afterwards and wonder why I am, just down in the dumps or have stomach cramps or no energy. And when you begin to pay more attention to that, it is genuinely startling the kind of effect your diet can have on your mood and your physical feelings of energy. So just on that note, it hit for me on that level. So that's what's going on with Sanji. And then we have to talk about what's going on with Brook. Brook is the one that I feel the most sort of confused by. He is in a cage where they're selling tickets to see him, like a freak show side show at a, what do you call it? A carnival sort of thing. But he isn't moving around, which is leading a lot of these people who bought tickets to believe that he actually can't move and that he is just a statue and that they have been ripped off. Which I don't know why I think that's so funny, but I think there was a part of me that sensed in myself this real feeling of like urgency that Brooke get up and move around and prove to these folks that you're not just a statue, even though why should he care what other people think? Why would he want to help the people that have kidnapped him? And I finally realized that, like, the reason that I was sort of feeling urgent about it was simply the fact that they're wrong. That it's that simple. These people are like, oh, he's a statue. I'm like, he's not just a statue. He's a person. Stand up. Like, I just wanted him to prove these people wrong, even though really what I should be focused on is that he make life as difficult as possible for the assholes who kidnapped him. And probably it would backfire and they would just do something horrible to him to get him to move around. But it was, just sort of I was just feeling like, get up, dude. Come on, go ahead. Meanwhile, Brooke himself, he is so focused on his own situation that he doesn't even hear these people like complaining around him. And he is just totally zeroed in on Luffy, the news about him and what he's going to do, how he can possibly help. And he's just sort of feeling like, understandably very isolated and useless at this point. And eventually it like comes to him, and for some reason he's just got access to a guitar, which I thought was truly hilarious because one of the characters in the scene straight up says like, hey, where did you get that? Which I'm always a big fan of it being acknowledged in a cartoon that what's happening in front of somebody's eyes is actually wild as hell. Usually you just take it for granted that it's cartoon logic and you don't ask any questions. So it's extra funny to me when somebody is like, wait, hold on, what? How did you get your hands on this? So the show he puts on, he basically does like a rock concert for all of these people. And he sings, it's in the middle of his like flashbacks to when he was asked to join the crew with Luffy. He's like playing on the piano, singing about how grateful he is to still be alive. And when we come back into the present, this is when he's like, he says, this was weird for me and I'm not totally sure how this goes, but he gets up and he just says 40 degrees and he leans forward and tips and falls onto his face and then says, that didn't go as planned. I guess like 45 degrees is the lowest I can go. I will have to keep that in mind. And I was like, I don't understand what you even mean. He says, well, I'll just have to, work with that. And I'm like, what? 45 degrees? Like, is this about an escape plan? Like, I don't even know. But he says, perhaps I can be of more help to Luffy and maybe there's an easier way. And this is when he pulls out the guitar. And I just love the fucking riffing and everybody in the audience just being like, oh, wait, that's cool. And he says, I don't have to worry about whether you guys like this or not because I have friends now. Come on, everybody. Just go ahead and dance to the music. And they all begin to like sway, and that's pretty catchy, and cheering him on and everything. I'm surprised they didn't have folks with lighters in the audience. And he says, I hope you enjoy my rockin' rollin' new single, Bone to Be Wild, which is just so silly and goofy. And as far as I recall, that's like all we get from Brooks at all. It's just straight up like ends there, and we don't come back to him. So I don't know if it's going to be that he's in isolation and so he's able to like write music, or because his is the one that feels the most sort of open for me at this point. His music is moving people. It's what inspired the other clan to stand up for themselves against the Long Arm clan. But it's not exactly like he's learning anything new here. So that's the part that I'm kind of, everybody has mostly wound up in a position where they're accompanied by somebody who knows more about whatever given subject they're interested in and can be a mentor to them in some way. And even like Robin with the revolutionaries, I think that could be said to be the case. But Brooks, I don't think, has that situation. So I don't know if there's just more to come with that, or if I sort of missed what the point was supposed to be for him. I don't know. But yeah, so that's as little as we get with him. And then let's see, I'm going to try and make sure I covered everybody's like details, because there's a lot of, like I said, flashing back that takes up a lot of time. So it's easy for me to skip through big sections of this. Yeah. Okay. So I'm pretty much covered on everything. And then it's just the last of these 3 episodes, which is Luffy's training begins. And this was really fun because we get some more details on what's going on with hockey and how this works. So first of all, we have arrived in Sabaody, right? Or no, it says a desert island northwest of the Maiden Island. And I thought that was really weird because it says desert island, and it's clearly got tons of greenery and forests and stuff. So I was like, do they mean deserted? It feels like it must mean deserted. But either way, this is where Luffy is going to do his training, and he says goodbye to Jinbei here, who is agreeing to like train for 2 years as well and come back to, I guess, be on the crew. I did not expect Jinbei to join the crew. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really care about it. I don't dislike Jinbei. I just find him a little dull. His powers are fun and interesting, but he as a person is just kind of like, he does say the right things. He's like got a decent integrity and everything, but he's just not that interesting to watch. But yeah, so evidently that's going to be a thing. But I really love this moment because he asks for Hancock to bring him food, and she is so excited. And of course, like, he said my name 10 times, we must be engaged now. But eventually she is told by Rayleigh, like, you definitely can't bring him food, because the whole point of the way we're setting this up is he's going to hunt and kill and cook his own food, and you will be spoiling that for him. So we're going to go do our thing, and you're just not going to see him because it's going to be an immersive program. So let's see. So then we get Rayleigh actually talking to Luffy. First, he shows him this one tree, and he says, like, this tree, none of the animals go near, so it's the one place that you can go to be safe. And it's a real weird looking tree that's like, it almost looks like a mushroom, but it's got a lot of sharp rocks at its base. It's sort of a weird setup, and he doesn't talk too much about this. And then he begins to explain to Luffy about how hockey works. And the first demonstration, as they're standing there, is this gigantic, like, weird elephant-type creature that comes up behind him. And he explains about... Oh, excuse me. How everybody could do hockey, but most people don't tap into it, and a lot of them just never had a teacher. But you can't have any self-doubt. And he closes his eyes, and then as this thing attacks him, he begins to just swerve and move with every jerk of this creature's head and doesn't get hit once. Meanwhile, Luffy immediately, he busts up to second gear and punches this thing in the face, and it doesn't do anything. It just throws him into a tree, and he has no effect on it whatsoever. So it's just, he's trying to handle this the way that he normally would, but it's no good for a creature that has these sorts of abilities. So yeah, Rayleigh is like, you can predict what their next move is going to be, and then we have Luffy flashing back to all of the people in this universe that he has come up against who have been able to seemingly dodge his kicks and punches with no effort, and he's realizing that's what they were tapping into. And Ethne with Mantra, it's called that, in Skypiea, but it's the same thing. So then Rayleigh does a thing where he turns around and raises a hand, and it's like this armor. And when the elephant attempts to attack him, it just gets thrown backward. He describes it as armor, but it feels a lot more intense than just armor. It's like they get an electric shock, like they've been tasered or something. So yeah, and that's what he says, like it can even be used as a weapon. And he like goes and flicks Luffy in the head, and Luffy's like, what the hell? I'm made of rubber. I shouldn't even have felt that. And he says, okay, yeah, see, this is another thing. Unless they have a specific weak point, those with devil fruit powers are hard to hit. Armament hockey provides the only offense against such enemies. So yeah, take those with Logia-type devil fruits. Their body composition makes them seem impossible to touch, but armament hockey has the power to strike them, which is very fascinating. I really, really like this development, and it makes a lot of sense. And then he says, oh yeah, I forgot, Luffy mentions the Kuja Pirates' arrows. It was like they were made out of steel. And he says observation and armament, they're the main two types of hockey. However, there are some people in this world who can use another type. And this elephant comes back for another hit, and he turns and looks over his shoulder at it and just looks at it. And it looks back at him, and its eyes go white, and it just keels over. At first I thought it was dead, but it seems like it's just unconscious, which is still bananas, and that's called Conqueror's hockey. The most well-known legends of the Grand Line often have the rare Conqueror's hockey at their disposal. However, although you can control it, unlike other types, there's no way to train yourself to use it. It embodies the spirit of the owner himself. Strengthen your spirit and you strengthen its power. And Luffy is like, oh, okay, so that's what you did at the auction house to make everybody just like fall down. So yeah, this is when he's like, yeah, and you did that same thing, by the way, when you were watching them about to execute your brother and you just screamed, don't you dare. And Luffy's like, oh, okay. And he's like, but you do need to learn how to use that wisely, because there are going to be innocent people caught in the crossfire and you could really fuck their lives up. So, and Luffy is so excited. He says, no wonder you were first meet. You can knock out enemies without even laying a finger on them. And it's just, just so thrilled, and is going through all the people that he realizes, looking back now, used hockey. And the episode basically just ends with the two of them, like, they're having a meal and talking about how hard Luffy is going to have to work. And he's like, I want you to develop all three because you'll have so much more at your disposal. You're going to have to work a lot harder than that. And we have some more flashbacks to Luffy and Ace. And at the very end of the episode, it's another montage of all of his friends saying his name, which, was nice. Unnecessary, but nice. And yeah, that is it. So I'm excited to start the new arc and see what everybody can do and what the new world's going to be, because apparently that bitch is no joke. So I'm down. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again, Florian, so much for commissioning this episode. Really appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope that you're enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.